Well, good morning and welcome to the third of 3 USDA data products legislative briefings. My name is Joe Parsons. I serve as Director of Methodology and Chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board at USDA's National Ag Statistics Service. These briefings grew out of an idea that legislative staff, as key consumers of ag statistics, might find value in briefings about the vast data assets at USDA, how to access them, and how to find assistance if needed. We're excited to bring you this briefing here to you today. USDA has a vast portfolio and wide and varied data assets. So we won't be able to do justice to all of the data that USDA has, but we do want to highlight some key data assets and perhaps give you some ideas for how to effectively use these public goods for informing policy. We appreciate that your time is valuable, so we're going to try to stay on schedule. We have 3 speakers today. Dr. Louis Tapas of the National Resource Conservation Service, Mr. Steve Peterson of the Farm Service Agency, and Mr. David Zanoni of the Risk Management Agency. We very much welcome your questions, but ask that you hold them to the end of the presentations or put them in the chat as you think of them, and we'll pick them up at the end for the Q&A. My colleague Marissa Ruber is putting a link in the chat to the location where you can find the recordings of our previous sessions that highlighted NASS, ERS, and World Board, and a second session that covered FAS and AMS data assets. Recordings of this session and copies of the slides will be populated to the site. We expect to populate the link with the recordings from this session later this afternoon. I'm going to have to step off for just a few minutes in a bit, but I will return before we get to the Q&A, and Marissa will be here to help in case we run any technical difficulties. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers today and get underway. Louis Tapas is the Deputy Chief for Soil Science and Resource Assessment at the Natural Resources Conservation Service. He is currently the Senior Subject Matter Expert on Climate Science for the agency and works closely with USDA leaders across the different mission areas to formulate and implement departmental strategies to address climate change adaptation, mitigation, and resilience in agriculture and forestry. Prior to this role, Dr. Tapas served as Deputy Director for Bioenergy, Climate, and Environment at the USDA's National Institute for Food and Agriculture and has over 20 years of experience in scientific leadership and management of agricultural research, education, and extension. Dr. Tapas holds a PhD in oceanography and was a faculty member at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Stephen J. Peterson currently serves as Associate Administrator for the Farm Service Agency. In this position, he provides leadership for FSA and its mission to support agricultural production across America through a network of over 2,100 county and 50 state offices. Steve began his federal government career in Pennsylvania and has served as County Executive Director. He later worked for FSA in Maryland as a program specialist. For the past 25 years, he's worked in the FSA National Office in Washington, D.C., serving as a program specialist, branch chief, and director of FSA's Production, Emergencies, and Compliance Division, where he developed multiple disaster programs and implemented numerous farm bills. Steve's current role, Associate Administrator for FSA, provides leadership to over 10,000 FSA headquarter and field office employees. Steve oversees the implementation and deployment of all farm programs, which provided over $31 billion in fiscal year 2021. In addition, to farm program delivery, Mr. Peterson oversees a farm loan portfolio of over $32 billion. Peterson is a 2006 graduate of the Federal Executive Institute Leadership for a Democratic Society program and holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology with a concentration in botany from Towson University. A native of Maryland, Peterson has farmed with his father his entire life, but has taken a hiatus since 2016. Peterson has 3 adult daughters. He and his wife live in Maryland. Our last speaker, David Zanoni, serves as RMA's senior underwriter, providing oversight in program design, risk management, and special projects. Prior to that, he was the chief of the Requirements Analysis and Validation branch with RMA for 5 years, and an economist with the Prices branch for RMA for 6 years. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech. I want to welcome everybody, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, Dr. Louis Tapas from ERS. Dr. Tapas.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, everyone. Allow me to close my video so I can preserve the bandwidth for the presentation. So stand by. So Marissa, are we on my first slide?
Yes, you're all set.
So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for participating. I will be talking about some of the data products from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Some of them may be familiar to you. And so I'll start with those that have public access. And I'll start with the National Resource Inventory, which is a collection of our status on conditions and trends of land, soil, water, and related resources. It's a unique data set, and it identifies the land uses of privately held lands. It gives us a national picture of economic and social forces impacting these natural resources and the amount of soil to erosion as well. The methodology includes 800,000 points on land and water. It includes 49 states. Data points are indicated here. Those are the years of the data points. We only have one for Alaska in 2007, but in 2021, 2022, we are going to include Alaska, and we have the resources to do that and the new technologies for it. So this will truly be a national resource inventory. And we have different remote sensing labs for image interpretation, and we have a partnership with Iowa State for statistical processing. One special feature of the National Resource Inventory is done on grazing lands, where in addition to geospatially obtained information, we also have point collections collected on the land use, the vegetative cover, the composition, and the extent of invasive species. So this is a subset of the NRI, but focused on grazing lands. And we use it to assess the hydrologic cycle and the other items in the bullets that I just mentioned. The other database product that we have is the Conservation Effects Assessment Project. It was established in 2003 to quantify environmental effects of conservation practices. It is an assessment done on a national, regional, and watershed scale. There are 5 components to it, as written over here. It is used for policy analysis, strategic planning, budget, and other items that are mentioned in the slide as well. And we are working to create other data products and tools for efficient conservation planning at the state and field office levels. As you know, NRCS has state as well as field office levels all over the country. The cropland data and modeling in particular is done with information that's obtained in cooperation with the Ag Statistics Service, the Farmer Survey. These are in-person enumerated surveys. They are sampled, similar to the National Resource Inventory. And we also get information on sediment and nutrient losses, and they're modeled at the field and watershed scales using the 2 models mentioned here. And we aggregate this data at different scales because we have to protect confidentiality and ensure statistical validity on a public basis. So we have what we call information suppression software to protect confidentiality. The other data products come from our snow telemetry, which we call SNOWTEL, and our snow climate analysis network. And we cover 70% of the Western US when it comes to its snowpack. And we provide real-time monitoring of mountain snowpack and climate information at 900 automated sites. And they cover 13 Western states. The forecasts in the spring and the summer are the water supplies for 600 stream flow points, and it's used by private and public water managers. NRCS also operates a soil climate analysis network. It's got over 200 monitoring sites across 40 states that collect climate and soil data. And these are all publicly available. And I will provide on the last slide all the URLs so you can access this information. And this slide deck has been provided to Marissa and Joe for distribution. So just a few more details on SNOWTEL and SCAN. This includes data on snow, precipitation, temperature, soil moisture, and others. And the customers that have used it include agriculture producers, managers for range production, managers for municipal water supplies, and a whole large group that's very dependent on it for the Western United States. Another big component of our data products comes from the soil and plant information system, delivery systems. The 5 mentioned here include the Web Soil Survey, Soil Data Access, Lab Data Mart, Plants Database, and the EDIT database. I'll explain those acronyms later. These databases contain information used to measure, model, and mitigate climate change as well. And in 2021, we had over 7 million users of all these 5 sites, websites. The Soil Data Mart in FY 2021 had a very large number of acres added to the soil survey inventory, as well as to the existing inventories, which were updated. And these include soil, chemical, and physical properties that support conservation practices. So this is one of our big products called the Web Soil Survey and Soil Data Access. Ecosystem Dynamics Interpretive Tool, which is what I mentioned earlier, is called EDIT. These are ecological sites, which are subdivisions of larger landscapes. And we use the software and data bases and products to predict responses to changes in climate and management. And it builds on the efforts of hundreds of individuals over 50+ years working in ecological systems. Now, plants. This is an interesting product from us. It's actually an acronym for Plant List of Accepted Nomenclature, Taxonomy, and Symbols. And you can see in the bullets on the left the different information in this data product, ranging from scientific names all the way to plant guides and fact sheets. It's one of the most heavily used data products that we have available. It covers 40,000 species in the US territories, as well as Canada and Greenland. And for FY 2022, we're going to include data on pollinators. We're preparing for that to be included in plants. We use this also in relation to tracking effects of climate change. We track changes in species ranges. We look at the pollinator information, so we're able to determine plant and pollinator ranges as well. So the image on the right side is a distribution map using plants data of tamarack, which is a boreal tree species that reaches the southern limit of its range in New York. And we can see the decline from the figure over here. So what I just presented were databases that have public access, but we also have databases and products that we produce internally for our own NRCS operations. So we really use science and evidence-based information for the decision-making we do at the agency. So just some examples is one of them is the National Planning and Agreements Database. It is a huge database, contains the records of conservation practices that are planned or applied on individual land units. They provide records of conservation practice from 2005 to the present. And they have practice information, which includes practice codes, applied dates, the land units. So it's a very comprehensive database, which draws on multiple sources for our internal decision-making. The other internal data product we have is our state landscape planning package. It's for the states to use in conservation planning and performance reporting. There are 3 main components: geospatial planning layers, a layer that assesses key conservation practices, as well as impacts of applied practices. The product includes maps and then user guides, and we distribute a refresh annually for the last 3 fiscal years. We also have state data insight reports. These are reports that are provided to the states, highlighting their accomplishments and prioritization of future conservation investments. It includes farm trends, land use trends, implementation trends using the Resource Conservation Act data. We anticipate distribution for this year, the first quarter of FY 2022, and we will continue to follow up our efforts on interactive tools and annual updates to the data in the summary reports. Now, I'd like to mention a very good joint work with the National Ag Statistics Service, and it's what we call a Conservation Practice Adaptation and Motivation Survey. This survey is designed to fill in these critical gaps in our understanding of farmer and rancher conservation practice adoptions, the rationale for it, and the role of technical and financial assistance and how we can improve these things. The goal is to provide insights that could be used in the design of future technical and financial assistance. It was initiated in consultation with OMB, and it's a partnership with Joe and his colleagues at NASS for survey development. There are 4 versions of the survey. As you can see here, cropland, grazing lands, confined livestock, and forestry. They will involve 5 to 9 key practices depending on the version. And they will look at adoption decisions, use of technical and financial assistance, and the factors affecting adoption decisions. So we really want to ask these questions on land and land use, livestock, value of sales, and a lot of information which the Ag Statistics Service staff have been very helpful in designing this survey. As of now, we have completed a pilot in 4 states that were used to improve the national survey questionnaire. The final questionnaire will be finalized hopefully before the end of this calendar year, and the survey will start in April 2022. The cropland and livestock is going to be started in 2022, and grazing land and forestry will be conducted in 2024. These are the URLs to the different data products that we have public access for, and that's where when you access this slide deck, those are live hyperlinks. So thank you very much.
Excellent, thanks. Steve, we'll go ahead and have you go next, if that's okay.
That'll work, Joe. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to address you all today and share some of the information that the Farm Service Agency has. Unlike NRCS, which is science-based, a lot of the information is used scientifically with regard to the programs and climate and things of that nature. FSA, as many of you are aware, is designed really to provide program support, assistance to farmers and ranchers across the country. And so our data is a little bit centered more to the actual participation in programs. FSA offers, safety net programs, conservation programs, so the Conservation Reserve Program, disaster programs, and of course, with the farm loan portfolio that we also have data associated to that. And so the presentation that I'm going to go through today, and Marissa, I apologize, I forgot you're driving the slides for me. If you can go to the next slide, please. The presentation that I'm going to go through is basically to discuss the data we have as a result of the programs that we administer and how you can gain access. The other thing that I'm going to apologize right out of the gate for is I did not include a slide that has the links. So we will have to follow up and provide where you can get access to some of the information I will be talking about so that you have an ease of actually being able to pull up the information and review it. So next slide, Marissa, please. So the data products that we have, as I've indicated, really come from the programs that we administer. Obviously, it's used and shared with our offices with regard to workload. Some of the data is used for workload strategic management. We also have the Optimal Productive Office tool that is used internally by FSA, and that helps us identify where we need to place staff with regard to the workload that's being done. But all of that is driven a lot from that general enrollment, the program specific detail, and the participation that's occurred. In addition to program participation enrollment, it also has some program specific attributes in the sense of tools that we have designed and developed to assist producers in making decisions when they're required to make elections or make decisions associated with how they want to take advantage of a risk pool. So it's also important and utilized that way in helping them make decisions in how they want to participate in our programs. The last bullet really talks about tools that we have internal that help us make decisions associated to programs, the disaster designations. If you all are familiar with that, when I talk about disaster designations, those are the presidential, secretarial disaster declarations that can occur as a result of adverse natural occurrences. And so that is utilized in the benefit of trying to identify areas that have been impacted by disasters and where we need to target some of that assistance. So next slide, Marissa. Starting with the farm loan program data, we have an executive summary that's available for the public to look at our loan counts for the last 2 years, in addition to the dollar amounts by loan type. If you're familiar with our programs and our loan programs, we have direct and guaranteed loans. They're operating loans and also ownership loans, in addition to microloans and also emergency disaster loans. And so ultimately you can gain access to that information at a high level. We do have the ability to drill down to identify the number of applications, loan applications received, in addition to targeting socially disadvantaged beginning farmer and veterans loans. We've been utilizing that a lot with a lot of discussions that have been going on the Hill recently with regard to some of the efforts to support disadvantaged producers and provide some assistance associated with that. In addition, you do have the ability to pull up state level data. So if you have want to know what the loan portfolio is for your state, you can access that information to identify how many loans are currently generated within your state and what types of loans those may be. The reports that we have available are for 2017 forward. Next slide, Marissa. Farm program data. Obviously, we have a much larger portfolio of programs, whether they fall into a conservation arena, disaster arena, safety net arena, just support programs. And so I'll go through a couple of the data sets that we have. First off is for the Conservation Reserve Program. We have ultimately 3 signups for CRP annually. We have continuous that goes for the full fiscal year. So it's a continuous sign up that's going on in addition to a general sign up in grasslands. We actually have those sign up details that can provide information associated to when those contracts are expiring. That information can be utilized. We know we currently have, at least for 2021, a 25 million acre cap of number of acres that we can enroll into CRP. That excels through the 2018 Farm Bill. That cap increases in 2023 up to 27 million acres. And so that tool allows folks to be able to monitor the number of contracts that are actually going out. These are 10 to 15 year contracts that are going out of cycle, that are expiring. And then you can also see the re-enrollments that occur as a result of those continued annual signups. The Agricultural Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage Program, ARC-PLC, I'll use that acronym from this point forward because that is kind of a tongue twister. That was authorized both in the 2014 and 2018 Farm Bill. This is where we have one of the tools, ARC-PLC tool, that is designed to help producers make elections. There's various options under ARC-PLC that producers can take advantage of, whether they want to cover both yield and price at a county level, yield and price at an individual level, or price, just covering the price level. And so under the 2014 Farm Bill, they were required to make a one-time election for the life of the Farm Bill. And so that tool was designed to help producers make that decision of what they felt would best work for them. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, although it started out for the 2020 and 2019 and 2020 years to be a one-time election, the 2018 Farm Bill does allow a producer to make different elections between the 2021 through 2023 program years. And so that's where the data sets that we have public facing are really valuable to producers because it assists them in making those decisions by utilizing the tool, such as what are the local county yields, what are the reference prices, what are the benchmark yields that are available, and they can go through and actually input that data into the tool to help them make a decision whether or not they think that covering or participating in ARC-PLC at an individual level is better than at a county level, whether I'm looped in and grouped in with all other producers, or whether I just want my price to be covered under that type of assistance. So the data sets that we have in there with regard to enrolled base acres, estimated pricing data, replacement yields, those county yields, in addition to the benchmark yields and reference prices, those are all key data sets that are then can be utilized by the producers to be able to help them make that decision with regard to how they want to enroll now that they have the ability to change that election every year. Next slide. In addition, we have commodity loans, both through loans that are offered by the Farm Service Agency along with co-ops. So whether they're cotton co-ops, whether they're peanut co-ops, they also have the ability to make loans to individual producers based on the commodity they either have in storage or on a warehouse receipt. And so we have data sets that are available and are accessible to identify the number of loans, the amount of commodity that's been put under loan, the type of commodity. In addition, we have a resource that allows you to go back and look at what those posted county price and LDP prices were all the way back to 2004 in the establishment and how the loan has progressed over time. One of the other items that is kind of falls into a price support risk management tool is the dairy margin coverage program. Again, this is a program that looks at the difference between the milk marketing price and the actual feed cost and allows a producer to elect a coverage level based on that price differential up to $9.50 to at least for the first 5 million pounds, and then for those pounds that exceed 5 million pounds, I think it's $9. But ultimately, this is a risk tool that producers actually purchase. And so the DMC tool, by utilizing the data that we have available to them associated to pricing, they can go through and determine whether or not they think, based on these pricing trends, whether the program will trigger for this next cycle. So right now we have DMC for 2021. We are getting ready to announce sign up for 2022 DMC. And we are actually finalizing that DMC tool right now, where producers will be able to use the data we have out there to be able to input into that tool to help them make those decisions. So it's informative not only when you make decisions associated to how we need to drive these programs forward in a farm bill, but also it's very valuable for producers because they're using it to help them make decisions on a yearly basis of how they want to participate in some of our programs. In addition, many of you are probably aware of the coronavirus food assistance program, which we began administering in 2020. We had 2 rounds of that with additional impacts along those lines with the new administration. We also have, it's been kind of rebranded to pandemic assistance. And so we do have a data set out there that actually allows the public to go in and see how participation occurred by commodity and the types of assistance, number of applications by commodity, and dollars paid out, both for those 2 separate rounds. And we will continue to, as we develop more programs to compensate producers for the market disruptions associated to pandemic and the revenue losses, we will continue to make more robust tools available so producers can take advantage of that, and anybody in the public can take a look at that. The last bullet there really addresses those presidential and secretarial disaster declarations. We have that data available since 2012, so you can go online. I would say that there's other tools, mapping tools. These provides maps and also the list of states and counties that have triggered under a presidential or secretarial disaster declaration. That information a lot of times is used when widespread disaster occurs to try to identify where the disasters have occurred, what areas of the country that has occurred in. We have historically used that information as a trigger to identify, basically as an integrity tool, to identify areas where disaster should be available, and producers can avail themselves of that, whether it be a presidential or secretarial. And so those maps are helpful. They identify both primary and contiguous counties that have been designated to identify that area of impact of where that disaster occurred. And again, that information is from 2012. Along those same lines, we have similar documents. If you are familiar with the Livestock Forage Disaster Program, we also have maps out there where by type of forage, those forages are actually triggering so that producers can come in and apply for assistance under our Livestock Forage Disaster Program, which basically is a grazing loss program and compensates producers for the lack of grazing due to drought or wildfires. Marissa, do you want to go to the next slide? In addition, we have had, based on the number of programs that FSA has administered, we have had a lot of freedom of information requests. And so because we have this participation program payment data out there and available by capturing it based on sign up, we do have it out on the Freedom of Information Act reading room, so that people that want to, instead of having to do a FOIA request independently, they can actually go out to that site and pull in information from 2004 to 2020 with regard to program participation and information associated with that. In addition to that, a lot of our programs require that producers, to be eligible to participate, they have to file an annual acreage report. And ultimately, that's very valuable information, not only for FSA and the integrity of the programs that we administer, in validating the fact that the producer has certain types of commodities out there that they're receiving assistance on, but also we share that information with NASS to support their farmer survey. In addition to, and I'm sure that David is probably going to go into this a little bit more detailed, we do share that acreage reporting information under the accuracy process, the acreage reporting streamlining initiative that's going on. And ultimately, we share that with RMA to mitigate producer having to submit the same information between agencies. And so that acreage reporting information is also information to mitigate some of the duplicative work that a producer may have to supply. We know that's still under process, but again, that is very valuable information that is not only shared to support NASS in their farmer survey, but also trying to share it within our agencies to mitigate some of the workload placed upon not only our county offices, because RMA can also share information from the companies to us, but we can also share our information to RMA and the companies, so it mitigates some of that work on the producer. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Marissa, is that my last slide? Yep. So I appreciate the time to address you today. And again, my follow-up will be to provide some of those links to the data sets, and we'll make sure that you have those for ease of being able to access the information. So with that, Joe, I will turn it back to you, sir.
Thanks so much. And yeah, we can, when we post the slides, we can post another slide with a link on it, or we'll find a way. So we'll get that up there when you guys have it available. And it is true that FSA data is very informative to NASS once it becomes available. I want to move on to our third speaker today, Mr. David Zanoni of RMA. David.
How is everyone? Let me do a live demo here. I'm going to turn my video off in a second because my connection can sometimes get a bit crazy. Let me get this all. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing our the RMA's main webpage. And I want to kind of highlight what we have just functionally here. I'm going to demo a few of the tools for you. But really, the main thing is if you go to our main webpage, just this tools tab, all this stuff is various information. I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see I'm going to highlight some of your business, the actuarial information browser, and something called the RMA information reporting system. But you can see there's a whole bunch of other things. If you want to get a big file of all the cause of loss information, you can certainly click on that, and there's loads of data inside that. But I won't go through all that today. I'm just going to focus on a few things. So if we go to the summary of business for that menu, you get a page like this. Again, there's a whole bunch of data, but the main thing is on this link will take you to the actual application to shows you what we can all provide. And so there's a customized report generator. It's pretty straightforward. So let's just do a few selections here. Let's say we want to have this year and last year. We want to add in, select a commodity. Let's select How about cherries? There's been some stuff with that. Let's do state. Let's go ahead and do, as it loads, let's just look at all states. And we'll just hit, that'll be good enough for now. Let's hit get report. And this gives you a pretty, as it loads in here, the core summary of business information. So we can see for each year that we've selected in each state, how many policies were sold, how many earned premium. So that's actually there's acreage associated with that policy. How many were indemnified. If you want unit information, scrolling over, you can see the number of acres insured, the total liability from an insurance perspective, how much premium was earned and all that. So we can see this big number, 26 million. That was state of Washington in 2021. The amount of subsidy. So if you're interested in how much taxpayers have contributed to the program for each of those numbers. Indemnities, what's the losses look like for that particular year. A few other factors. The additional subsidy is kind of interesting if you're familiar with the pandemic cover crop program that was been out in 2021 that paid the cover crop incentive. Any of that money would show up in this column if it's there. So if we picked like one of the row crops, which is most common, you'd see a bunch of data in there that would show you how much went out for the cover crop program, or the state cover crop programs also would be in that column. And the very last one, loss ratio, it's a common insurance metric, kind of shows program performance and legislative mandate that we have to keep that near 1 in the long run. You can kind of see how that works. But that's kind of the core of the data we can provide, and all these different selections you can make to kind of find exactly what you want. You can also export the file to Excel. You can do it as a text file, or this is kind of neat, this little link button here. It gives you the ability, a static link. You can send that link to someone, and if they click on that, they'll go to this exact search in the website, so they can see current data. So it'll do this search for them, only update with the data that's most recent. And this data is, you can see it shows an as of date up here, but it's updated basically every Friday or every weekend with the most current data. So this is pretty close to real time in terms of what we've received from the private insurance companies for the that have sold to the federal crop insurance program. You can also do selections at the county level, delivery type. So that's this is all buy up for cherries, but if you want to look at cat policies, that'd be a selection depending on what you select here. If you're interested in what type of insurance plan, that'll all be the same here for cherries because it's all ARH in this case. But had you chosen something else, it'd give you like a revenue protection or an APH plan, or if you want to do it by coverage level percent. Those are all tools that you have at your disposal to kind of customize exactly what you want to look for. Of course, you can do it by the reinsurance year if you're familiar with how crop insurance uses the reinsurance year as opposed to commodity year. That's usually the same, but again, a lot of customization. There's other things within this application, prepared reports. These are just kind of static, kind of PDF versions of high-level information. If you're not wanting to search everything, you just want something, this is a program-wide one. Historic reports, again, you can click through all this stuff. The best thing to do is just browse. You can see all sorts of data that you might be interested in. And these code listings help kind of give you what some of the abbreviations mean throughout time, so you can make sense of some of the data. So that's summary of business. Now I want to move on to the AIB, or the Actuarial Information Browser. This is a key tool that kind of helps our policyholders, our agents understand the terms of their insurance policy. So I'm going to select 2021 year. Let's do rice. So let's just say we do rice. Let's do a plan 2, revenue protection. Let's pick Arkansas. What's a good county? Let's do Lafayette County. Hit view report. This takes a second to load. Okay, and you can see this has all these different tabs of information you might be interested in. So here's type practice information. So you can insure short grain rice, medium grain rice, long grain rice. You can do it as irrigated, sprinkler irrigated. organic. So each of the different choices are all listed in there. Unit structure, if you're interested on what units you can choose. Prices. Again, I won't go through all this. I just want to give you a flavor of all the different data that can be in here. If you want to look at the prices, here's what the projected harvest price was for each of these different types and practices. Contract price factor, if you use contract pricing, the volatility factor, which is a key factor in terms of revenue rates. If you use the down commodity endorsement, here's what the coverage amounts looks like. SEO, ECO are all in there. What else I wanted to show out of this one? I don't think we have maps in this one, but that's fine. There's also a tab in some places that will give you map areas. So if you need to look at, if you're in a county that has by a river, you might want to look to see if your land's in a high risk area, and there'll be a link to actually show you the map of where the high risk land is. So you get charged an additional rate because you're in a flood prone area, for example. But again, just loads of information in here, all kind of customized at an individual offer level. So this would be more for if you're looking for an individual piece of information, whereas the summary of business is more of that macro, what happened. And then the last tool I wanted to demo really quickly is this RMA information reporting system. Again, another one of those choices from the tools menu. And you got some choices here. I'll click the insurance offer reports one just as an example. Again, you can see a whole bunch of different options. Best thing you can do is just get in here and just browse everything that's available. But let's say we want to look at yields. That's a common request we have. Insurance offer transitional yields and revenue. So I'm going to click on that choice. Let it load. If we get the menu to pop up. Oh, it's going to give me a error. That's the problem with live demos. Let me try to refresh this and see if we can't get it to work. Let's just do it this way. I'm gonna try that one more time here, see if we can get that tool to work. It worked this morning when I was practicing, I promise. If I don't get something in a second, I'll just kind of explain, but the basic idea is I will have to talk to our IT people about making sure that something's not broken with it. But the basic idea is all those reports get in there. It's the same basic thing as the others. You just make your selection on what crops, what states you're interested in, and it'll give you a big data file on all the yields associated with the insurance offers. Again, it's anything you'd want in there. The best thing I can say is just browse. There's so much data that we put out there to help people kind of find what they're looking for. It's almost kind of limitless in terms of how much you can ask for. But maybe it's best just to kind of stop there. And if there's questions, I can go over individual pieces or stuff like that, because really the best thing you can do is just go in this tab and browse everything. So I'll stop there, Joe, since my last report wasn't working for some reason.
Excellent, David. Thank you very much. And that's the way it works. If you weren't live, it would work. Everything would be perfect. So I think what I will encourage you all to either come off of mute or put your questions in the chat, and we've got a couple minutes here for that. David, I guess I'll start with you maybe, since you just finished up here. If somebody, like all of our data offerings and websites and such, things are a little bit complicated, and some of us, you're obviously super familiar with the reinsurance business, and somebody might not be quite as familiar. if somebody needs service, I assume that they can come to you guys and you'd be glad to help them out.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's any type of data that you're looking for, and you can't just find it naturally through browsing those tools, coming to us, myself, or our team can easily help narrow down what we have available. A vast majority of the requests we get, it's out there somewhere. It's just there's so much that sometimes people just can't find it. So there's really, we get those type of requests all the time. So please ask, so we can make sure we either have it out there, or if it's not out there, see if we can share it. Because there's sometimes we'd like to go further than we do. Sometimes people have unique questions. So.
Gotcha. I see John has a question. John, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for doing this today. This is extremely helpful. I had two questions. One on NRCS. You mentioned the CPAMS survey that you're conducting with NASS. When do you expect that the results of that survey would be made available to the public?
So, Joe, I think you're in a better position to respond to the processing time for a NASS type survey. So we are providing the questions for it, but the survey will be actually conducted by NASS. So what's your time frame around those your surveys, Joe?
John, I guess to give you some specifics is, normally whenever we do that, we would call this reimbursable work, right? So we're doing this with another federal agency. Usually what we publish and when we publish, we would, negotiate with NRCS. I'm not super close to this particular activity, but I do know that the first effort was a pilot effort. So it sort of informed a larger survey that is still in the future, to my knowledge. So the short answer is I don't know exactly, but I will find out and I'll get you an answer. How about that? Yeah.
Sounds good. And then I had one more question, if I could.
John, just say the first survey will start in April, and it'll cover a sort of a 2-year period, and then in 2024 we hit forest lands and grazing lands. So we split up the types of lands that we're surveying, the types of producers in those types of lands. So, and your next question, please. Sorry, John.
No. Thank you, Louis. I appreciate that. Throughout this whole series, Joe, we've seen whether it's NASS or Foreign Ag Service or RMA today, we've seen that many of the agencies have an online query where you can search for particular data and download that data. ERS has that. Louis, is there any effort underway to take and FSA has a tremendous amount of data that they make available on their website. But when it comes to NRCS, is there any effort, Louis, to provide that same type of data accessibility, especially when it comes to your Title II conservation programs like CSP and EQIP? We get state level data that's provided online, but anything that's more disaggregated.
Yes, sir.
So thank you.
The answer to that is farmers.gov. And we've already started the process. Currently, all EQIP information is in farmers.gov. And we're migrating into that. Joe may be familiar with this. It's the attempt of the Office of the Chief Information Officer to put everything into that one centralized place. So we are moving in that direction, following the guidance of the Office of the Chief Information Officer. So we're getting there. Farmers EQIP was last year, and we're progressively adding more databases and data products into farmers.gov. That's where we're headed, sir.
And so, Louis, will that allow one to see, say, Sangamon County, Illinois information? Then you would be able to disaggregate, or is this just for the producer?
You can find the number of contracts for every county that's been given on a specific conservation practice. It goes there. So if you go there now, and you'll see all the EQIP grants there. You can see all the conservation practices that are being invested in and where they're being invested in. Of course, we've suppressed the information, so there's no personal information that can be taken out of it. But it does actually go into some very specific areas of the contracts that are given, how much was invested to the county level, sir.
So Louis, maybe we can add that to your last slide before we.
I'll do
post
that.
up the
Yeah,
slide.
I'll give you the link to farmers.gov because
Yep.
the ball has started rolling there, sir. So
Excellent.
John, it's a work in progress. We've started it already, and NRCS is following what the Chief Information Office is trying to achieve for USDA in general.
Thank you. And that then leads to one more follow-up, and I apologize. Louis, is there a way to, can you see all of the activity in a particular county, whether it's NRCS, FSA, any of the FPAC mission areas?
So we're contributing to it. I think the attempt is the goal is to have everything there. So it's just started. We were actually the pilot for it. NRCS was the pilot for it, and we were able to prove successfully that we can provide public information with suppression of personal information. So since we've proven that that's possible, I think there will be a larger migration of information to farmers.gov that way, sir.
Thank you very much.
And if John, if you wish to get more information, the person at the USDA level is Ted Kauk, and I can provide that information as well.
Ted just left for OPM, so it's Chris Alvarez now. But yes.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's Chris Alvarez, but we can.
Chris, that's right.
Hey, I want to get to Steve here while we're waiting on our next questions from the floor, but I have one more question for you, Louis. So, you know, with the soil survey and the maps and everything, those are hugely valuable, hugely popular, I know, as well as the other databases. But those are other folks use those too, right? And even in some commercial applications.
Yes.
So do you have APIs and stuff that folks can do machine-to-machine connection for your plants database, your soil maps, et cetera?
Yes, we do. We're kind of on a hold right now because the protocol and system that we do that in is at the George Washington Carver Center, which is currently under refit right now. So they've already completed half the building. We're working on the other half of the building, which is our half of the building. And in that half of the building, we will have a secure data room where we can do those types of API work in a secure fashion. So a couple of months more, and we'll have that system set up already. It just, the Carver Center is where we would do such a thing, and it's under construction right now. Okay,
great. Good to hear. And so Steve, great talk. I really enjoyed it. Just curious, you know, with all of our agencies, you know, obviously NASS uses data from the Farm Service Agency once it becomes more final, as well as RMA and other administrative data. But in order to administer farm programs, you guys must also consume a huge amount of data. So do you make some use of AMS or NASS or ERS data? Maybe, I don't know if you have a comment there.
We do, but not in the sense that we, you know, I would say probably the data we use most is NASS data, in the sense that we use your information to help support the establishment of our yields and prices for disaster programs for ARC-PLC. We use RMA data for ARC-PLC as well to determine those benchmark yields as the first source, and then NASS as number two. And so I would say those are the real key pieces. You know, one of the things I didn't reference is as a result of the, you know, the hemp issue and AMS going out with their hemp rule, FSA is engaged with them to actually take the acreage reports on their behalf for those licensed operations. So it's more of us sharing data. Now, I do know, like when we establish and try to develop policy for programs, we work closely with the Office of the Chief Economist, you know, our own business center, Economic Policy and Analysis Division, with regard to try to assessing some of the cost of what a program would cost. So it all depends on the program. It depends on how we interact. But I would say probably the key players that we have historically engaged with is NASS, RMA. Obviously, we share information with NRCS. They share we take information from them associated to conservation compliance and also, the plans, work plans that are done for CRP, et cetera. So it really depends on the program and how the information is utilized and needed.
Sure, you're great. I appreciate that. And, I think that just points, across this vast department, just how much data it takes to build evidence, to structure things, to know and to manage processes. And we also produce a huge amount of data. And that this is, I'm really thrilled that you all ask us to do this. It ties in very well with the Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018. And so we're always happy to communicate about the data at USDA. And so I don't know if we have any other questions, but if not, we're coming up on the top of the hour. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and to Kyle and John and to everybody else on this call or who's been attending. If you have any suggestions for us, we would love to have those. If you think that this series might be useful for others in the future at some point, we'd love to hear that too. You know how to get up with us. So look for this afternoon the link to the recordings and slides, which Marissa just put in the chat. And with that, we'll let you get back to your day, and thank you for your time. Have a great one.